What's going on, guys and girls? It's your favorite English teacher giving you the tips that you need to be successful in your English class. Today, we're going to talk about types of sentences. And I'm going to couple that with independent clauses and dependent clauses. Yep, there's a lot to learn. So you got to make sure that you have out a piece of paper and a pencil so that you can take notes. And when you get back to class, I promise you're going to look like a genius. Let's get into it. So tell me something. When you write out an essay or a narrative, does your writing sound something like this?
I hated when people threw their books on the floor.
Well, if it does, then you have a case of the simple sentences. Yes, it is a horrible disease that most students get when they're first learning to write complete sentences. Overuse of simple sentences can sometimes make your writing seem very, very boring. Who wants to read a paper that just has the same sort of sentences used over and over again? I like this, I like that, I am this, I am that. Listen, we gotta add some diversity to your writing. Now, today we're going to talk about 3 different types of sentences: simple sentences, compound sentences, and complex sentences. Okay, however, I cannot teach you these 3 types of sentences without first talking about the 2 different types of clauses. Now, this is going to be very quick, so you got to make sure you're really listening and taking notes as I talk, all right? So, the first thing that I want to talk to you about are independent clauses and dependent clauses. So, an independent clause is a clause that can exist on its own. It's one complete thought. Yeah, just one. Watch this. Here's a good example. The cat is fast. It's one complete thought, right? It doesn't get really complex in that sentences. However, on the other hand, we also have a dependent clause, which is another word for saying the clause is dependent, which means it has to have another clause in order for it to make sense. So here's an example of a dependent clause. Let me know if it makes sense. Although I fail. That sentence sounds like it's missing something. It's missing an independent clause. Now that you guys understand what an independent clause is and a dependent clause, let's move on to talking about the 3 different types of sentences. The first type of sentence that we're going to talk about is the simplest form of a sentence, which is kind of its name. The simple sentence. The simple sentence only expresses one complete thought. In fact, it is an independent clause. Here's an example. The man is tall. You see? It's just one complete thought. Now, just because it's a simple sentence doesn't necessarily mean that it is restricted to just one subject. In fact, you can add in multiple subjects with one complete thought. Here's another example. Miles and Howard ran home. You see, technically, there are 2 subjects in this sentence, Miles and Howard. However, it still only expresses one complete thought or one independent clause. Therefore, you're still kind of simple, buddy. Let's move on to compound sentences. Now, when you add in some compound sentences into your writing, you're looking a little bit more like a scholar. You see, a compound sentence is a sentence that has 2 independent clauses. However, the 2 independent clauses are connected by a coordinating conjunction. Now, if you don't remember what a conjunction is, think the word fanboy. Okay, it sounds weird, but it's really just the letters that you need to pay attention to. So, for, and, but, nor, so. Okay, and yet. Oh, goodness gracious. I almost forgot the conjunctions myself. Those are the fanboys. And in order to have a compound sentence, you must have a conjunction that goes right before the second independent clause. Here's an example. The house was big, but it didn't have a green door. You see, in that sentence, technically, we have two independent clauses. However, did you notice the conjunction? Yes, the word but is a conjunction. Let me show you another example. The girl was beautiful, so I smiled when she arrived. Did you notice the conjunction there? Yeah, the word so is a conjunction. So, again, whenever you're using compound sentences, remember that you always have to have a coordinating conjunction or a fanboy. Now let's move on to something a little bit more complex. Yes, we're moving on to complex sentences. Now, when you move to complex sentences, you're really starting to look like a scholar. In fact, at this point, you're already a scholar. All right, let's just get that out the way. Okay, so a complex sentence is a sentence that has an independent clause and a dependent clause, right? It has both. So this is the first type of sentence that has both an independent clause and a dependent clause. Check out this example. Although he had a car, he didn't know how to drive. Which is kind of weird. I mean, why have a car if you're not gonna drive it? Like, that makes absolutely no sense. Okay, I'm sorry, that's besides the point. If you notice this sentence, which one of the parts of the sentence was the independent clause? Right, exactly. Yes, now, did you notice the dependent clause as well? Very good. See, the independent clause of that sentence was actually the second part of that sentence. Now, what if I started off the sentence by saying, although he had a car, and then period? Does that make any sense? Well, no, it seems like you're leaving something off. And that's just the nature of a dependent clause. See, a dependent clause, like I said, always has to have an independent clause to go with it in order for it to make sense. But when you put on that independent clause, but he didn't know how to drive, well, now the sentence makes sense. Simple, right? Well, let's look at another example. When prices go up, customers buy less. Now, in that sentence, the independent clause is the second part of the sentence, of course. Now, try to say the first part without using the independent clause. When prices go up, period. You see, that doesn't really make any sense, and it could not exist as a single sentence because it's a dependent clause. However, you need the other part of the sentence in order for it to make sense. Now, on one end, you never want to overuse simple sentences because it could make your writing sound very boring. But on the other side, you never want to overuse complex sentences because it can make your writing sound a little bit too complex to understand. To make your writing great, you're going to want to use a mixture of all three sentence types. Remember, moderation is key. We want to make sure that we have a balanced piece.